We had some really, really high-level guys fight for us. We had John Jones fight for us, probably the most notable. And John was 4-0, and he fought a guy that was 2-0, and it was Parker Porter. Parker's a UFC heavyweight now.
Wow.
So it was pretty cool, both at the beginning of their careers. Dana says if you put John Jones in a room with any other human being, John Jones comes out of that room, right? I think that's the greatest way to put it, because he's just an absolute savage. You know, I just made these decisions along the way to do the wrong thing, and I wound up in a situation where all my friends were going to prison for long terms, and I was doing all the same stuff with them. I had a really bad habit. I had to make a decision to get out of it. I went to a 12-step program, and I got clean, and I stayed clean for about 3.5 years, and then I left, you know, thinking things were going to be different. It took me 35 years to get back, and you know, I've been back for about 4 years. That's kind of how I got back into doing the fights again, right? So I had been out for a bunch of years. I took 10 years off, and all the trouble that I've ever had in my life has been through my own making.
Ain't got a moment when they see you down, there's no love and all.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Bounce Back Podcast. I'm your host, B. Luke. I got a special guest with me today. Why don't you tell the people your name, where you're from, and Combat FC, your role in it, and everything with that.
So my name's Joe Cavallero. I'm from the North Shore. I grew up in Linfield. I got this brand. It's called Combat FC. We do live mixed martial arts shows. Right now we're at the Shriners Auditorium. We've been doing it for like the last 20 years in that building, and it's a 3,000 or 4,000 people. You get to 4,000, so that's getting a little tight in there. But it's pretty cool. The fire marshal, the police guys give us a little bit of a hard time. But so we're trying to get to like the Agana Center is the goal, right? So we're Boston University, where the hockey team plays, and that's like 10,000 seats. So we're slowly growing. I actually had a brand before this called World Championship Fighting, and that's what we started with. And that was when MMA was in its infancy, when the UFC was just starting to come around, when Dana bought it. We did, I think, 11 shows under that brand name. And we had some really, really high-level guys fight for us. We had John Jones fight for us, probably the most notable. And John was 4-0, and he fought a guy that was 2-0, and it was Parker Porter. Parker's a UFC heavyweight now. Wow. So it was pretty cool. It was... you know, it was both at the beginning of their careers, and John is, I mean, Parker's had a tremendous career, but John has been...
John's like almost universally recognized almost as like one of the greatest of all time, right?
Well, Dana says it, right? Dana says if you put John Jones in a room with any other human being, John Jones comes out of that room, right? I think that's the greatest way to put it, because he's just an absolute savage. And even back then, you could see it. His coach was a guy that we respected. You know, he trained a lot of guys that were really good in and out of the UFC, and he said this kid is legitimately the most special athlete I've ever seen. He just, you know, it's like, you know, I can hit a baseball, you can hit a baseball, but Barry Bonds, he's doing something completely different. It's like Michael Jordan, you can play basketball, I can play basketball, but Michael Jordan's playing something completely different than the way we are, and John Jones is like that. And people don't think about fighting so much, like, you know, like I can throw a punch and you can throw a punch, but when you get a guy that's a professional fighter that throws a punch perfectly, it's just so much different than you know.
A lot of sports too, you know, baseball. I mean, I can hit a baseball, but if I got, you know, Pedro Martinez throwing it, probably chances are I'm not going to hit the baseball. These people are specialized.
And when you see it on TV, it's so easy to watch and just say, you know, I don't know why this guy just doesn't get up, like hit him, you know, do whatever. And, like, it's not that simple. If the guy could just get up, trust me, he would just get up.
Well, what I hear and I like a lot is like, you know what I mean? You play basketball, you play baseball, but like when it comes to combat sports, boxing and MMA, you don't really play fighting, right?
It's so serious.
I heard that and I I like that a lot. You know what I mean?
It really is a cool thing. I was just out and I'll tell you a funny story or a funny line that I heard. We went down to the UFC in Miami a couple of weeks ago, and there was a time during one fight that it just got, Trump was there. So this is the point of the story. Trump was there with all his cabinet and all the, you know, Tulsi Gabbard, Bobby Kennedy, and all those people. It was pretty cool. And for some reason, the arena gets really quiet. There's 20,000 people in there, but when it gets quiet, when the fight's going on, sometimes you can almost hear everybody, you know, that talks or yells something out. So there's one point during the Bryce Mitchell fight, it was quiet for a second, and the guys were just kind of feeling each other out. And then some guy from the back yelled, "Hit him with a tariff!" And I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" You know, it was the fucking best thing I've ever heard. And I was sitting behind one of the senators, this guy Byron, whatever his name is, and he goes, "Did he just say hit him with a tariff?" I was like, "Yeah." It was pretty funny. But
that Byron Donald? Is that his name?
Is that what his name is? He was cool. His wife was real interested in the fights. He seemed to be just in there. He was cool. He sat right in front of us, so we kind of were in the same section talking. But his wife was really into it. She kept asking me, like, what's the deal with this fight? Like, what's the story behind it? And that's the best part about fighting, and I think that's what the UFC does better than anybody, is they tell you these stories, right? On Wednesday, the week of the fight, they start telling you the story about why this weekend is going to be the greatest fights you've ever seen. And then they tell you the story behind the fight and what the angle on it is. And then every weekend they deliver. Right? And I think that's where boxing lost it, right? So I love boxing. I'm a huge fan. I haven't watched it as much recently, but back in the day, it was the greatest sport in the world. We watched everything. We used to travel to all the fights. We used to do all that stuff. And I had the opportunity. I was an absolute horrible boxer, but I had the opportunity to train with some really, really good guys like Dana Rosenblatt, Richie LaMontagne, and Mickey Ward, and the whole gang of guys over the years. Marcus Davis he went on to fight in the UFC. He was number 6 in the world in the UFC. So,
well, how do you think boxing lost it? Is it the politics in it? I know we had organized crime maybe at one point way back.
So what happens is Dana says it really well. It's like a going out of business sale. Every time they do a fight, all they care about is promoting this one big fight and grabbing as much money from the public as they possibly can. So Dana just did a deal with the Sheik. His name is Turki Ali, and they just did a deal to take over boxing. And instead of going out and signing guys like Canelo Alvarez and the guys that are really popular right now and trying to make these super fights, they're going to start from the beginning. They're going to get guys that are 3, 4, 5-0 out of the best gyms, and they're going to sign them to contracts like the UFC. And right now the company's called TKO Boxing. I think Dana said they were probably going to change that, but so they start signing their own guys, and then they do. This is the part that they're trying to work out, but I would imagine what they would do is the way Tuesday night fights used to work, which I don't know if you remember back in the day. Tuesday night fights was like ESPN's version of fighting, and every Tuesday night they would have a fight somewhere in the country. So they'd work with promoters like me, what we consider a regional promoter. We're the Northeast, the brand in the Northeast, and they would come to us and they would give us a handful of fights that they want to see on TV. So they'll give you 6 fights for television, and those are great fights, and you show the guys' careers progressing, and then when the guy gets to 18-0, then they do their own pay-per-view stars. So rather than chase all the stars that are out there today, I think what they'll do, and I can't speak for them. I don't work for them. We're partnered with them on our Combat FC brand, but it's we serve as a feeder system to them. We have great relationship with them, but not. I definitely don't speak for them. But I would imagine, being in the business as long as I have, that would be the market that they would, the avenue that they would take to do it. So it'd be really cool, if they start building their own stars. And then what happens is, it's a perfect example with the UFC is like, the UFC comes to Boston, they don't even say who's fighting, and they sell out 20,000 seats, right? Because you're going to get a really good night of fights. And that's the way it'll be with boxing. Well, they'll have a brand, whatever it's called. Right now it's TKO Boxing, but they'll bring it. You'll go just to see that, and then they'll stack the card with good guys. And what happened with boxing, I think, in the past is they'll have one really good fight, and then they'll have 3 mismatches, guys they're trying to build. So you got to sit through these fucking
guys that going up against stepping stones or whatever you want to call
It's all right to do that. It's all right to put a guy in with a stepping stone if it's an actual step. But if it's just a guy you're going to walk over, like, I don't know, I don't want to see that, right? I don't want to see somebody get taken advantage of and beat up. And I'd rather see a guy, to make a move up and take a little bit more of a test, but they really don't do that in boxing. They build these guys. What I think the reason why they don't, in their defense, is people take it real serious when you're 18-0. Like in MMA, this guy's like, I'll give you a perfect example. I don't know if you remember him, a guy named Matt Brown. They called him the Immortal. He was just a savage. I think he ended his career at, whatever, let's say 36-16. I would pay to watch that guy fight anybody. He's just such a savage, like Robbie Lawler, guys like that are just, they have a handful of losses, but it doesn't matter. And I think that if they, show this new generation, this younger generation of kids, that it really doesn't matter about the records, it's about the fight.
I think it's just an important lesson too. Like, it's okay to lose, because a lot of times losing is like the biggest part of winning. I like to say it's not the opposite, it's a part of it. You know what I mean? I think Floyd Mayweather, as great as he was, he hung on to that undefeated too much, maybe, you know what I mean? And I think that just kind of carried on to other people, and they just got scared to lose or something. I don't know what it was.
He was a tough guy to root for, because
a lot of the off the Well, out of the ring stuff too. It was a little bit extra.
He wouldn't engage, like he wouldn't fight. Like guys didn't like Sugar Ray Leonard back in the day, but Sugar Ray Leonard, he danced around and he was a really pretty boxer and he was really this. But when it came time to fight, he stopped, stood in the pocket and banged with guys, and he fought everybody. Like he didn't back down from anybody, and you know, like Mayweather just never did that.
Especially the way he talked, like, you know what I mean? Like he didn't fight how he talked, right? Like he talked, he's the best in the world, but then he's like. He's like you said, he's not engaging. You know what I mean, and he just was more defensive. Shit, right? You know, and
you know, people will watch a guy like that just to see him get beat, right?
Yeah,
I joke around.
I think that was a big part of it.
Yeah, I joke around all the time when we sign fighters. You know, I tell the kids, I'm like, you know, when they first coming up, I say, you know, you might get 100 people to come see you win, but there might be another 100 people to buy tickets just to see you lose. You know what I mean? It's like
as long as they show up, as long as they keep showing up, you're making money, right?
Yeah, it's awesome. So I love the fights. it's something that I have a passion for. You came, you know.
Absolutely. I had a great time. You guys put on a great event, and I'm looking forward to the next one. So let's get a little bit into that. So you got an event coming up. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we have an event June 13th. It's at the Shriners Auditorium in Wilmington. Our website and all our social media is all the same. It's combatfc.tv, combatfc.tv. Really even fights that have consequences, right? With our relationship with the UFC, we get guys that are either coming out of the UFC to fight for us because they lost and they want to get back in, and they'll come down and fight our champions that are, you know, that are on their way up.
Yeah.
Whoever goes gets an opportunity to fight in the UFC, which is awesome. You know, I think the last time when you came to the fight, the kid Damian Nelson, that black kid, he starched the kid with the right hand, dropped him with one punch and knocked him out. I think it was a 4-round fight. I mean, it was after a really good fight, but he caught him perfect. And that kid's the real deal. He's going to the UFC at 145 pounds, and it'll be fun. And then we had this kid Pampas Gregorio, who's a 135. We've had a whole handful of guys come, you know, in this last rendition of our fighting organization, this new Combat FC brand that we've had for a couple of years now. We've had a whole handful of guys go on and either fight in what they call the Contender Series, which is you watch that?
Yeah,
that's
I remember
so
that.
much
Yeah,
fun.
I remember that. I watched the first season, I believe.
Yeah,
but,
I think they're on like the 8th season now, which is insane. That is so much fun because they take all the best regional fighters, guys that fight for shows like us. So we handle the Northeast, and there's a guy in Texas that does. There's a guy in the Midwest. There's, you know, and they'll take their champions versus our champions, and you're not even guaranteed a fight. You're not even guaranteed a contract in the UFC. You're guaranteed to fight that night. It's so down and dirty that they don't even give you any walkout music, right? They literally make you walk to the ring without anything. Music. They don't give you any. You know, it's not like when you're in the big show and you get all this stuff. Like you go out, you have an opportunity one time to make an impression on Dana, and you either get a contract or you don't based on your performance. And he's taking guys and giving them contracts on losses. Wow. Right? Guy loses a close fight and it was such a good fight. He'll say, you know what, I'm taking both of you. You know what I mean? Because again, back to that boxing thing where the losses really don't matter, right? It's about the fights, and the UFC does such a great job with that. They just that telling the story and making people interested. That's kind of the stuff that we try to, like. I'm not creating anything new, right? I'm not I copy what everybody else does that's working, right? I've been doing that my whole life, and I was a salesman, and you know they told me what to say, and I went out and said it, and you know that's how it works. So I don't. I'm a good parrot. I'm not really a good.
Well, the story's a big part of it. It makes me think of like what Vince McMahon did with like the WWF and WWE for so much of that was the story. And granted, that's a little bit more embellished and everything as well. You know what I mean?
Cool.
But
it's all entertainment, right? At the end of the day, people pay to get entertained. They want to see something cool. And you know, Vince McMahon. I remember back in the day, you know, people thought that was a joke. I remember at one point it was a $485 million publicly traded company. I was like, that's huge.
Yeah, quite a joke.
They just merged with the UFC. I don't know if you saw that. They merged with the UFC. The UFC got valued at $12 billion, and the WWE got valued at $9 billion.
Wow.
Billion. I don't even know what $1 billion is. Right? I mean, it's so much money.
I wouldn't know what it looks like.
Yeah. If they brought it in, you know, you put $100,000 in front of me, I could pick it out. But other than that, it's just the numbers just get stupid. But $1 billion is a ton of money, and to be at $9 billion, you know, and they just did a deal with Netflix, so now they're on Netflix, which is pretty cool. And Netflix is 375 million people. And again, I have a hard time with these numbers, but I'll give you a great. I try to learn stuff as I go, right? So, Mike Tyson fought Jake Paul, right? And in the scheme of boxing, Jake Paul absolutely sucks, right? I mean, I don't want to fight him. I'm 60 years old, but in the scheme of fighting, he's never going anywhere. He's never going to beat a real boxer, like a real, you know, top 20 boxer, he's going to get the shit kicked out of him. And he's a tough kid, and I got to give him credit for getting in there and doing what he's doing. But
there's levels to it, though.
yeah, in the scheme of
what it is.
boxing, he's not a boxer. Not a competitive boxer that's going to make it to any type of thing. And then Mike Tyson's my age, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he was one of the greatest guys to ever fight, but he's my age. So that fight has no significance at all anywhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything. 65 million people watched it, right? So again, I say it all the time, right? I don't know what 65 million people looks like.
Right.
So I went and Googled it, right? Because I'm not an idiot. I could go on Google. The Super Bowl last year was 110 million people.
Wow.
So it was just more than half of what the Super
right.
Bowl was, which is incredible, right?
Right.
It shows you the appetite for combat sports. That people are dying to see
Absolutely.
that stuff. The Super Bowl did $1.8 billion in one night.
Yeah.
Between licensing and sponsorships and all that shit. So,
Big
what is that Tyson fight worth? You know what I mean? What is, like, if the UFC, because the UFC's deal with Netflix is with ESPN is up this year. So in 2026 we're going to be on a new platform.
Okay.
We don't know exactly where it's going to be, but I know that they're talking to Netflix. I know they're talking to Amazon. I know they're still talking to ESPN. There could be a combination where they wind up on a couple of different platforms, like the way the NFL's doing it and the NBA and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But if they ever went onto Netflix and let's say that, like I said, there's 375 million people that have Netflix. Let's say 200 million of them already know.
Yeah.
But there's still 175 million people that have never seen it before that can never get it for free. It'll blow that sport up. It'll be the biggest thing that ever happened. So, I love it. I have a passion for it. I love the fights. I love business. I love real estate. Real estate's a passion of mine.
Yeah.
Everybody I know, with the exception of Dana, has made money in real estate.
Yeah.
You get the exception every once in a while. You hear somebody like Dana's story, which is one in a million.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? He's just the world aligned that he was the right guy at the right time.
That's what it
I
is.
don't know whether anybody else would have been able to do what he did. And a bunch of stuff just happened the way it was supposed to. And,
so, not saying I know as much as anybody that of these guys running this stuff, but just as a viewer, as a fan of sports and stuff like that, the too many platforms, to watch one game on this, another on
hate
this.
that.
I tell you what that's a recipe for. That's a recipe for piracy and just going on one of the sites and just because it's just too you can't find the game and it's like I got to sign up for a whole new thing, which takes 15 minutes. The game's on in 2 minutes.
Yep.
I would say try to stick to one, but I say, there's people that know a lot more than me, but just
the
as
question
a
is,
viewer,
can
as a
anybody
viewer.
afford it, right? I mean, they're looking for $1 billion a year or more. I actually heard more. I don't know. You read different things, but it could be $1.5 billion a year, which is insane. I mean, they do 42 events a year. How do you divide, $1.5 billion by 42? It's a staggering amount of money.
I want to talk a little bit about this event you got coming up. So when you have an event at the Shriners, how many of those fighters are local guys or girls?
We do a lot of Northeast, right? So you'll see guys from New York. You get guys from Jersey, Connecticut, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. We have a handful of guys that fight locally. There's some, believe it or not, in Boston, there's some crazy, really, really good gyms. There's, I probably shouldn't be naming them, but, there's, right up the street in Somerville is Delagratti's, Mark Delagratti's Sit Your Tongue, which is a, Thai boxing gym, and they've done MMA. So they had guys like, Patrick Cote and Marcus Davis and Kenny Florian, all guys that fought for world titles, really top of the heap guys. And then there's a bunch of new gyms that are coming up. There's guys like Nostros and there's just a million.
Yeah, not to mention all the jiu-jitsu places and stuff. I know,
so it's in the beginning it was just like, what's going to happen, right? What are we going to do when we put two guys in a cage?
Right.
And that was the way they marketed it. And nobody was a mixed martial arts.
Right.
You had a wrestler, you had a jiu-jitsu guy, you had a judo guy, you had a kickboxer, but nobody.
But that was the fun of it, the specialist. What happens when a boxer meets a...
That's what made it so much fun. But
absolutely.
now you get these kids. Like, we had a fight recently, and I have to stand on stage. They make me do it. And I hate stuff like that. But I stand on stage when the kids are weighing in. So there's these 225-pound kids. I mean, 225 pounds is tiny, right?
Yeah.
And they look like they're 12 years old. And I'm looking at my matchmaker, and I'm like, I want to tell this kid to go home before the streetlights come on, right? And they came out the next night and fought, and they absolutely killed each other. It was their amateur debuts.
Wow.
And they were so skilled and so impressive. I was like, it's just crazy to see generation of kids that now train in everything. They're not just good boxers. They're just so well rounded, and And then it amazes me every day to see how many fucking gyms there are and how many kids are training. And it's like, it's not like a regular sport where you can just go in. If you're not good, you get the shit kicked out of you. And you got to have, a lot of balls to get in there. Like you got to
bigger consequences when you lose, right?
Yeah. You got to give these guys a lot of credit for going in and doing it. And,
absolutely,
it's so much fun. So the next event's going to be a blast. We're just starting this week. We'll start seeing posters, right? So, and that's how I find out who's fighting, right? So I'll get an email from the guy that does the posters, and it'll be copied, my guy Rick on it, and then it'll be sent to me, and I'll be just copying on it. And I'll open it up, and I'll be like, oh, that's a great fight. That's a great fight. So. We see a lot of, but we got a lot of the regulars coming back. There's a couple of guys that are just incredible. There's a kid that I love. His name is Kyle Hill. He's a 170, tall, skinny kid. Looks like a surfer. If you looked at him, you'd be like, just a regular dude. You know what I mean? If he gave you shit in the bar, you'd tell him to fuck himself, and he'd tear you apart. You know what I mean? There'd be nothing you could do.
Yeah, a lot of those guys are kind of like that too.
Yeah, there's a whole handful of guys that are really fun that are up and coming. There's a kid, Jan Oliveira, that's a double champ for us. He's part of that fighting nerds. The guys that come in the cage afterwards and they wear the glasses with the tape in the middle. They call them. It's a new gym. They call themselves the fighting nerds. But he's in with those guys. So that's I think it's Alex Pereira and those guys all train.
Oh wow!
And that's the Alex Pereira and Glover Teixeira have a gym in Connecticut. So we get their guys. So Glover Teixeira was the 205 champ. Alex Pereira is obviously, he's killing everybody. But so we get those guys to come in. We'll get their jiu-jitsu coach, or we'll get their striking coach to fight. Guys that are up and coming, and it's a blast.
And I feel like you said too. With the popularity of the sport, like I feel like back in the days with the boxers, you kind of got like the street kids, the poor kid, like Bernard Hopkins learned how to fight, not learn, but he fought in prison. You know what I mean? And it was like a lot of times those guys were like, this is the only way out. But now it seems like, man, anybody is signing up and really going really far.
It's funny that you say that because you have to have money to be in mixed martial arts, right? You have to have taken
those gyms are expensive. Yeah, that's true.
Your parents have to have put you in some type of a martial art. So you don't get guys. It's a perfect, perfect insight on your part. It's like you don't get guys that are fighting to get out of anything. You get guys that are, like Chuck Liddell was an accounting major at Cal Polytech,
Crazy,
and he had greatest guy in the world. Like when you see him outside, you'd never even know, If he didn't wear that crazy mohawk, he'd just be a regular dude, you know. And Chuck's a super good guy. I'm very friendly with him. He's a super guy. I want to bring him out to do one of the shows. So back in the day,
he's like the OG, especially when it comes to UFC.
And he's like. He's like Eddie Van Halen. Like he's just living that rock style life.
Nice.
He's such a savage. Deserved. Yeah, we used to run around Vegas together after the fights and stuff. It was fun, but
it was crazy.
So I want to start bringing guys in again. One of the things that I did when I had that World Championship fighting brand is I always made sure that I brought somebody to the fight that everybody would care about seeing. So we had like Rampage Jackson came just to do an appearance. We had Butterbean. We had. Dana White came in one time in 2008 for me. We just Patrick Coates, just a bunch of guys, big name guys that you would, everybody would know. But I want to start doing that again. And I think Chuck's one of the guys that I like to bring in. And what I'd really like to do is like to start doing clinics. Yep. So, do a seminar where they come in and teach. So we'll give them all the money from that. We give them, we'll have them do an appearance at a bar someplace because our fight's a Friday night. We'd have them do an appearance on a Saturday night when the UFC is there. So the bar would pay them. Yeah. I would pay them. They'd get money from the seminar, and that way they get a little bit of money together. And then whatever product that they're trying to sponsor, like Chuck has a T-shirt line. I can't remember the name of it. I should remember it. But he has a T-shirt line that I think it's called King of Violence.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. And it is. It's called King of Violence. And so, I give him some sponsorship with that. I mean, that's when you look at our company, we do three different things. Like we're a sales company, right? At the end of the day, it's all about selling, right? We sell tickets. Our cheapest ticket is $70. Our most expensive is $250. So we sell tickets. We sell advertising and sponsorships to people that have a brand. So Coca-Cola, Red Bull, Nike, anybody that wants to be associated with 18 to 59-year-old men and do something cool around them, because not only do you get the brand exposure and people see it, but you get that you get that rub on being involved with something cool. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to get Holly Davidson locally, the New England Holly Davidson guys, to come in and do it. You think about that. So you and I think Howies are cool. Like you're probably the last guy that's going to buy one, right? Your generation.
Right.
Like, but I'm too old, right? I mean, I might buy another one maybe, but there's not a lot of longevity in waiting for me to buy bikes. I'm going to be dead in another 20 years. But if they can get involved with something really cool and then get the kids to start seeing it different again, you know what I mean? Like kids don't see it's not like back in the day. Nobody had tattoos. You know what I mean? Like, and now you're an asshole if you don't have a full sleeve. You know what I mean? The culture has changed. So they need to get with something hip, right? And that's the conversation I had with the guy that owns one of the dealerships, and he's like, "Yeah, we're really not interested in that." And I'm like, I just don't see it. Like, how you could not be interested in 18 to 59-year-old men? I mean, that's your demographic, and especially the young guys you got to get because those are the guys you can sell multiple bikes to. But it's
eventually it's going to die down.
We just went down to Miami I was telling you, we went down to Miami for the fights, and I'm 59. I'm going to be 60 in September, so I ride a little bit. I'm not great, but I can ride as well as the next guy, I guess. And I can do a wheelie, but I can't ride a wheelie. Right? I've never been able to ride a wheelie. So I hired this guy. He's like a stunt rider, and he's got this thing that goes through the back spokes of the wheel. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I think so. Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Afterwards,
does it drag on the?
Yeah, so it stays. So when you flip, you fall on top of something as comfortable as this couch. So we went down there. I hired the guy for 4 hours, and me and all my buddies went down there and just tried to learn how to ride wheelies. And I could do it pretty well. You could get it up and ride.
Jeez.
When it starts going fast, that's when I either loop it over or I drop the front. One of the two. What a time! We did that during the day, and then we went to the fights that night. And the night before, we went to there's a kid, a social media influencer kid. His name is Aiden Ross. You ever hear of him? Mm-hmm. So he had a private, invite only. They didn't sell tickets, I guess is the best way to put it. But it was all the social media influencers, the biggest social media influencers in the country. Wow. And Dana, obviously, they invited him to go, so I tagged along with him. Oh. They had the kid there, the Island Boy kid, the little kid with all the tattoos.
Yeah.
I have no idea what his
goofball boy.
Yeah, I have no idea what I have no idea what his deal is. But I tell you what he did. He came up, he stood in front of that cage, got rubbed, got Vaseline, put all his shit. They checked his gloves. He got in the cage. He got the shit kicked out of him, but he had the balls to do it. And I told him afterwards. I grabbed him afterwards, and I said, "Listen, that place was going crazy, booing." And I said, 99% of these people in here will never have the balls to do what you did. I said, you should get some fucking training. You definitely need some training. But, the fact that he did it, I don't know.
But that's the thing, though, too. People would actually, want to see that. Sometimes I think people want to see, just regular people getting in the ring. Well, and maybe not just only that's great. It's the, scientific stuff. But, let's get this kid in the internet who got a big mouth, talk these guys, and let's get in there and box it out. Because that might lead to even preventing violence on a different level too. If you just get people in the ring to box it out.
I'm a firm believer in it, but it was pretty cool. It was that's what it was. It was all social media influencer guys that fought each other.
I think I saw a clip of that.
And it was there's probably 150 people in the entire arena.
Wow.
And it was cool. It was interesting. The fights, weren't great in the scheme of fighting, but I actually grabbed the kid Ross afterwards. So I met him that night with Dana, and then he came to the fight the next night and sat in Dana's section.
Oh, nice.
So I grabbed him and I said to him, I'd love to get involved with you guys and do something, right? Because he likes to be, doing the commentary and streaming it live to all his people. I'm like, dude, I'm already doing fights. Forget about doing the fights. I'll do the fights. You just come ringside and sit and do your thing and sell some sponsorships, and we'll figure out how to split the money, right?
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, so he gave me his number. I haven't contacted him yet. I want to do it when we go to the next level, when we go to that Agana Center. Or it's either going to be the Agana Center or it's going to be Fenway MGM.
Yep.
So they just did a wrestling thing in there. They actually did it the night I got back from Miami, and I stopped on the way back from the airport and told the girl, I said, look, I'm looking at the venue. Can you just let me in and look at it? Right. And it's 5,000 seats.
Yeah.
They're all right above the thing, and it was AEW, maybe?
AEW, yep.
Yeah, so it was awesome. It was so cool the way they had it set up, and all the fans were cheering. They were all cheering the same thing. I don't know what it was, but they would, it was just... It was awesome. It was just such a good time, and it was right on top.
It's a nice intimate environment. I think I've seen the inside
right
of
on top of each other, packed full. Wow. It really was cool. But
that's pretty cool.
To make that next jump for me is another $100,000. It's not like the show cost me about $1.50 now. And with all the TV production and all the things that we do and paying the fighters and hotels and insurances and all these different things, I mean, everybody's got to get paid. You got lighting guys and rigging guys, and, unions and this. It's crazy, but to go to that next level, to go to these big arenas, it's another $100,000.
Yeah.
So
Sheesh.
I got to figure out a way to sell a minimum of another 100. A minimum of another 1,000 tickets, because our average ticket is $97.
Okay.
So, like I said, 70 to
Yeah, the
250. They average
average,
out at
yep.
about $97, and so I back to the original story because I go off on a tangent.
No, it's all good.
Sales business, tickets,
Yep.
advertising and sponsorships, and licensing deals to networks.
Mm.
So our biggest licensing partner is the UFC.
Okay.
So they take our product, we sell them 6 fights, they put them live on UFC Fight Pass,
Oh,
and then
nice.
people tune in from all 180 countries around the world.
Wow.
And we just did a deal. We're in 300 million houses on what they call FAST TV. So FAST is an acronym. It stands for Free Advertised Supported TV.
Oh, okay.
So if you think of like Roku,
Yeah.
Amazon, Apple, Fubo,
Yep.
TiVo, Sling, all those channels that you get for free
Mm-hmm.
are free advertised supported television. We have a deal with them. We do a revenue split with them. So all the TV commercials that get sold, we get a piece of.
Oh,
And it works a little bit different on live content. We get a bigger piece on stuff that's reruns. We get a little bit less, but it's really cool.
Wow.
And so if you've got a company, let's say you just came out with a Red Bull, right? You're
Yeah.
on Red Bull, whatever you want to call it. And you want to get in front of that demographic and you want to be associated with something cool. There's nothing better, right? 'Cause
Absolutely.
nobody can afford to get in with the UFC. You got to be a real
Yeah,
big
you got to
brand.
already
You
be,
gotta-
Corona, Budweiser.
yeah, you got to be a
yeah.
real big brand. But if anybody's, trying to break into that thing, we have such an enormous reach. It's 300 million houses in the U.S. and Canada.
Wow.
And I don't know how many people watch it out of that. I'm not saying 300 million people watch it, but that's that's how many customers have it in their house, to be able to watch. And
That's cool. So talk a little bit about like how you got into this whole thing, right? You had mentioned you did some boxing.
Yeah.
What happens? How do you go from just doing some boxing, you say you weren't very good, to just
Yeah.
knowing some people to
yeah,
doing?
so it was weird. There was a big gym in Revere. It was called Nautilus Plus. It was 120,000 square feet. So to give you an idea, like Planet Fitness might be, 25,000 square feet. It was 5 times the size of that. It was enormous. But there was no such thing as a gym back then, right?
Right.
I mean, I was around when there weren't sneakers, right? Nobody had sneakers. You wore Chuck Taylors.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
a sneaker. Remember, they came out with Nikes, right?
I know. I see the old commercials with like Bird and them
Yeah.
playing, and I'm like, how is that
Yeah,
even
yeah, it's
supported?
crazy. Like
There's
that.
no ankle support.
No, it's the worst thing in the world. But they came out with sneakers and they came out with these gyms. And the machines were called Nautilus machines.
Yes.
And this kid, Jimmy Dakotas, he's a North Shore guy, opened this enormous gym called Nautilus Plus.
Wow.
And everybody went there. So Rogan used to go there.
Okay.
So I've been boys with Rogan for, he's a couple years younger than me, but I've been buddies with him since way back in the day. He lived in Newton. And he trained in Taekwondo, and they had a Taekwondo gym in the building.
Wow.
It was called Jay Kim's, and Joe's a really high level. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
and he's a really high level Taekwondo thing. And Taekwondo is a tremendous art. It's a really cool, fun style of fighting, but it's really watered down around the country, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people that teach Taekwondo that are teaching down a watered down version of what it is.
It's become trendy.
Become
Yeah.
really Americanized and really. And I'm not saying that all the gyms are like that, but
Right.
just there's a bunch of them that are. So you get guys that are black belts in Taekwondo that can't fight at all.
Got you.
And then you get guys that are black belts in Taekwondo that kick everybody's ass. And
Right.
Joe's one of those guys, right?
Yeah, I
And
love
this,
Joe.
I'm not knocking Taekwondo. I love it. I think it's a tremendous sport. I think anybody that does any type of martial arts, it's the best thing in the world
Yeah.
for you, right? It keeps you off the street, right? A lot of
Absolutely.
people, I would suggest anybody that has kids, you get your kids into some type of martial art, right? So,
Even if it's just for the fitness, because I
Yeah.
know a lot of people, I mean, I've seen people that they seem pretty skilled and talented,
Yeah.
but it's like they won't get in the ring
Yeah.
for some reason.
Yeah.
Maybe they never
Yeah.
got hit before, but
Yeah.
even just for the fitness aspects of it and the discipline, it's
the
worth
discipline,
getting
you know,
into.
that's what it is. It's the discipline. It's teaching kids respect and self-confidence and because that's what, I think what a lot of us were lacking, right?
Yeah.
When we grew up, because I had a crazy life myself. I listen to your podcast. I can relate to a lot of stuff. I don't want to get into a lot of it, but
I know.
I had a really crazy life till 22,
Mm-hmm.
and then from 11 to 22 was a really tough period for me, and then. I changed things up and I got out, but all my friends were either dying and going to prison for long bids, and I didn't want to be that guy. But I had that background, and I think martial arts kind of saved me from a lot of that. There was this gym, and I used to work out in the back. They had some heavy bags in the back, and I used to be able to kick really well because I had always gone to karate since I was a little kid. I was a really hyper kid, so my dad sent me to karate. My parents sent me to karate, and I was in there and I was hitting the bag and I go to punch it. I could kick really well, but when I went to punch it, I did this. There was this old timer. This guy was 1,000 years old, and his name was Joe Lake, and I'm a kid, I'm 18, 19 years old, and this old timer was in there, and he says, "What the hell were you doing?" When I hit the bag, he looks at me, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I said, "I'm hitting the bag." He goes, "Stop, you're bothering me." He goes, you want to learn how to box? Come back tomorrow. So I thought he was 1,000 years old. Turns out he was like 26, right? But I was such a kid, I didn't know the difference. So I've been with Joe since day one, and he's been really, really good to me. He's like a brother to me, like an older brother, and he kind of let me go through the motions with everybody and train. And I got a chance to train with, like I said, Dana Rosenblatt, who was the middleweight champ of the world.
Wow. So
Dana and I started out kickboxing together. We had a buddy named Richie Angelo that passed away. He was a super nice guy, but he died doing a triathlon. But he was just a savage of an athlete. Everything he ever did, he was great at. And so we trained with Richie and Joe and Dana. And then there was a handful of guys that were kickboxers, and it became pretty obvious pretty quick who was going to excel and who wasn't. But I loved the fights, and I would go to the gym every day, and I would train, and I would, take my knocks and do whatever. And I just couldn't. I wasn't that good. And again, it's not like you can't be all right and you're either good or you're not. Right. So Dana, I got to be a part of his career, and got to go through the entire thing. We had another guy named Marcus Davis. I talked about him. He was a UFC. He was number 6 in the world. So Marcus was 17 1-on-1 as a pro boxer, and guys like Mickey Ward and all these guys. Richie LaMontagne, was a cruiserweight. Richie's a good dude. Made it to the highest level. I think Richie fought Vasily Girov. I mean, he's, some real high-level guys. And, again, I wasn't anywhere near there, but I got an opportunity to be part of it, right? I got to travel to Vegas, and I would ask the questions. I'd say, why are you guys doing this? Why are you, they'd negotiate everything, right? They would negotiate the size of the gloves. I'll give you a perfect example. When Sugar Ray Leonard fought Marvin Hagler, I don't know if you remember that fight, but Hagler was a brawler. Sugar Ray Leonard was a boxer. So when they negotiated the size of the ring, Sugar Ray was the name behind it. He got to say, "I want the biggest ring that I can," so he could move. And if Hagler could have fought him in a phone booth, he would have had it done in a phone booth. And then they negotiate the size of the gloves. So I would pay attention to that stuff because I had an interest in it. And Joe would tell me why we were doing stuff. And so I worked at a hotel. I don't know if I told you this. I was 22 years old. I worked at a hotel. I was a doorman. I never had any aspirations to be a doorman, but I wound up doing it. And we were making $1,500 a week in cash in the 80s, right? The 87 was a lot of money, It was a lot of money back then. It'd be a lot of money today,
That's good money for sure.
And I had a buddy of mine that was a bellman, and it was Dana White.
Wow.
So way before Dana ever got involved in anything, he was training with Peter Welsh, and we became really good friends. She had a passion for fighting and passion for drinking and fighting on the street. So we were maniacs. We ran around together for years, and obviously, it's transitioned, but that's kind of that was what got my start. And then when Dana White got involved with the UFC, and put the deal together by the UFC, he said, "You should start managing guys, because I'd rather deal with you, and I know you know the business."
Yeah.
So I got a whole bunch of guys that I started managing, and I had a couple guys fight for world titles. I was very, very fortunate.
So when did you start doing your own events
promotion
and everything?
in 2006.
2006?
Yeah, so
okay.
the management company is what drove it, right? So I was managing all these guys, and I was getting a lot of up-and-coming guys, and I couldn't get them fights anywhere. There weren't enough promotions to do it. So I said, geez, I'll start my own promotion. I'll build some of my own guys up, and then bring them on and go to the UFC.
Wow.
So I got, talk about a blessed life. Like I've had, I don't know if you hear people sometimes they say, oh, my luck, this will happen. Like, my luck, I got a horseshoe up my ass. Like, I've had nothing but good stuff happen to me, all my life. I've had a lot of really bad stuff happen. And again, I won't get too far into that, but same situation, it was all my fault. You know what I mean? It wasn't like I had two good parents. I had a brother and a sister that loved me to death.
Made some bad choices.
Yeah, I just made some really stupid choices and did a lot of stuff to.
So why don't you just give the people? I know you don't want to get too deep into all that. Maybe like a brief rundown of like what you went through and then bouncing back from that.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I was just a hyper kid, right? I was the youngest kid in my neighborhood, and I started smoking grass when I was 11 and drinking. And you know how that story ends, right? So at 22 years old, I had lost everything, and lost the respect of my, I just I went against everything that I was brought up to be. My father was a really hardworking guy. He was from Charlestown. He was a crazy guy, but he did everything for my family and worked like a dog. My mother was, the nicest person in the world. My mom's still alive, and she's the best. And I just made these decisions along the way to do the wrong thing, and I wound up, in the situation where all my friends were going to prison for long terms, and I was doing all the same stuff with them. I had a really bad drug habit, and I decided, I had to make a decision to get out of it. And I went to a 12-step program, and I got clean, and I stayed clean for about 3.5 years, and then I left, thinking things were going to be different.
Yeah,
they weren't.
I'm fixed.
It took me 35 years to get back, and I've been back for about 4 years.
Hey, well, here you are,
that's kind of how I got back into doing the fights again, right? So I had been out for a bunch of years. I took 10 years off, and all the trouble that I've ever had in my life has been through my own making, and it's all been through that, right?
And you seem to have learned from it, which is like the important thing, to make sure you learn from it and not to repeat mistakes, and then show people maybe going through those things that there's a way out, there's light at the tunnel, and you got to find something. And for you, that was the fighting and being involved with that.
Yeah, that's my thing. I'm blessed to do for work what I love, right?
Yeah.
It's a ton of work. It's so much. It's so, like, if you look at the amount of hours that I work and all that stuff, I'm probably making $3 an hour, right?
Right.
Work like an animal.
Because you work 24/7 almost,
I risk a huge amount of money that I don't even have. I have to juggle the money. It's like. But at the end of the day, we have an opportunity to grow this into something really big. You saw the event.
Absolutely.
I mean, how cool was that?
I'm looking forward to the next one for sure. Man. What's like your favorite part about putting together these events? Is it the day of?
Yeah, I just love seeing everybody at the fights, all my friends, and I love the day before when I get to see all the fighters. There's a part of me that I try to be a mentor to those guys, because a lot of the dudes come from very, they have crazy backgrounds.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to speak for any of them, but there's one guy in particular that I want to see if I can get on with you. That's had a crazy story. That's a really tremendous fighter, and he can tell you whatever.
Yeah,
he wants
let me know
when he gets on.
And anyone out there, any fighters, anything like that, you didn't have to go to jail. I mean, just had to have been through stuff, which we all have, which is kind of why it's the bounce back, because it's vague enough where it's not just this is the prison podcast. Let's bring in anybody who's been through stuff.
You've done
oh shit, that's the whole world pretty much.
Everybody,
you know what I mean?
I see people on the street, and every day I just see people. We were talking about it earlier. I got an old time buddy of mine. He's 85 years old.
Yeah.
Korean War vet. He's got cancer. He's in Mass General, and I was up there the other day, and I'm in the waiting room, and I'm on a phone call, and I'm just looking at the people, and their family members are dying. Everybody's going through something.
Yeah,
right?
that's for sure.
And for my buddy, he's 85 years old. He's lived a long life, but there's a lot of people that that are kids.
Like Joey Lawless says, I heard him say it a couple of times. If we all threw our problems in a pile, you'd be quick to take God's back when you see what other people are going through.
Joey's such a good dude.
I love Joey. Make sure you guys tune into the Lace Up podcast. Joey and Devin doing great things over there.
Yeah,
man.
That's a fun podcast. So I love yours. I think the first one I saw was Johnny. Johnny's my guy, right?
Yeah.
So we
big shout out to Johnny. That's who I went with. That's how we met. We were at the last event, man.
Yeah. So Johnny and I were buddies at Nautilus Plus in Revere.
Wow.
That's where we met. We became friends through that, and then he went his own way, and obviously his story is his story. But when I heard that he came home, I actually called a buddy of ours, a mutual friend of ours, and I said, "Geez, you ever hear anything from Johnny?" And they said, "He just got out." And I said, "You got to be shitting me." And then a week later, I ran into him.
Crazy how it works.
Yeah, he's such a good dude.
Yeah, it is.
Talk about a comeback story.
I know.
He's done really well.
I wish I had 5 hours to interview him. You know what I mean? His story deserves that much time.
He's got some crazy.
Absolutely,
stories, but I was lucky that I didn't spend a lot of time in jail. I did just enough time in jail to realize that it's something that I didn't want to do.
So why do you, all right, so what do you think you would attribute that to, the biggest reason of you not going when all your friends are going? I know you said you got a horseshoe up your ass.
Yeah.
Good parents too.
Yeah.
A little bit of everything.
I think everything, I had, my family's a huge part of it, right? My family always fought for me, and when I was 22, I had lost everything, right? I didn't have any teeth. I was 147 pounds. I had,
Jeez, 140. And how tall are you? Just for the people that don't know.
I'm 6'3", I'm like 240. So,
that's skinny.
Yeah, I was in tough shape, and I went to a 12-step fellowship, and I wasn't going to say this, but I'm like a year sober, a year clean, and I'm a guy that was older than me. I'm talking to him one day, and I'm like, I'm so sick of everybody treating me like I'm a scumbag, loser, thief. I said, I can't stand it. I'm going to kill somebody, right? Everybody treats me like I'm an asshole, and like I'm a scumbag, and like I'm a loser and a thief. And he just looked at me, he says, you ever think about not being a scumbag, loser, thief? I was like, no, I never really thought about that. That was it.
Yeah,
like
wake-up call.
I changed my life at that point, and I made a decision that I wasn't going to do anything. I got completely out of the game. I don't buy hot stuff. I just don't do it anymore. And I made a decision. I was 22 or 23 years old. And from that point in my life, you could talk to anybody. Like you could put $1 million down in front of me. I don't. It's not worth it. It's not worth my reputation. You know?
I hear that.
I've been blessed with a second life, right? I really have been able to get out of that and never look back. And you know, the guys that I was with literally have all died. You know? I mean, it's. I was just talking to a dude that I ran with when I was a kid that got out, and he's got, you know, an incredible, amazing, horrifically sad story, you know, of all the things that happened to him in his life. And I remember distinctly being a young kid and going down that path, and people, you know, I was the youngest kid in the neighborhood. I didn't just start smoking grass when I was 11. Everybody else was 15, and somebody handed me a joint, and I was a little kid, and I didn't know the difference, you know. And I remember people telling me the whole, you know, as I got thrown out of every school that I was ever in, and every, you know, situation, and, you know, you know how that story goes, right?
I get you.
every point somebody would tell me, this doesn't end well. This isn't where you want to go. You're going to wind up losing your friends. You're going to wind up going to jail. You're going to wind up doing all these things. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? I'm just having a good time. I mean, I didn't
these
realize
people are crazy saying all this.
There's 10% of the population that has this thing, and you either got it or you don't. And if you have it, it's, you know, there's a way out, you know. But
so I was just going to ask, like, what advice would you give to somebody that's like struggling with addiction right now? You know what I mean? What would you tell them especially if they want help?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You got to want help, right? So you got to, you know, it's one thing to try to tell people anything, and then it's another thing to really want help. And I go down Mass Ave on Tuesday nights, every Tuesday night. So I spend a lot of time trying to do service to help people, right? So I go down Mass Ave every Wednesday night. I've been doing it for over a year, and I go down there and I just buy 10 pizzas, blocks of 10 pizzas, 120 slices of pizza. I think there's 12 in a box. I buy them from Costco. I buy water, candy, and juice, and I go down there on my own with another guy that I'm friends with. And I just tell everybody there's a way out, and that I love them, and that God loves them, and that they don't have to live like this. I've been doing it. I'm at a point now where everybody knows me, right? Like I'm part of the community, and like I don't go down there to preach to them. Like so, when you say, "What do you say?" I don't know what to say. You know, I tell you there's a way out. That God loves you. That you know
you're not alone.
Yeah, you're not alone. Like there's a lot of people that have been through the same thing, and people that have been in such dire situations, and then to come out of it, and you know, if I can make it, anybody can make it, right? So, that's what I say to them, right? And I don't preach to them, and I don't try to get them to do anything, you know. But they know if they need something, like, you know, not material shit, but like they need the help getting anywhere, or getting into a detox, or getting anywhere, you know. That's I'll help them in a second, you know, because I've been there. Like I lived that life, unfortunately, and it's made me who I am. So I'm you know, you know, you hear people say just. You know, I'm grateful to be in that situation. I'm not really grateful to be in that situation. I wish it was different. You know,
but it is what it is. You do what you can.
I wish I hadn't made all the mistakes that I did, but I don't live like that anymore, and I don't feel like doing it. I don't have any desire to anymore like that. Like I actually went through the steps in the program and take it serious and take service serious and it works. You know, it works for anybody. Like you know, the consistent thing my whole life is every time I've ever gone back, those people who've been there and they've told me the same thing, and they've always welcomed me back, no matter what condition I was in. Like, and I've been in some tough situations, coming back and being in the halls and being really whacked out, and you know, nobody ever said, "Hey, you got to go. We don't want you here." You know, they were always like, "There's a way out. Like, you could do this." You know,
so okay, we talked about that. So, what advice would you give to somebody who's looking to maybe get into like business, real estate, or sales in general, stuff like that? What advice would you give to somebody?
There's so much information on YouTube. I know it sounds corny, but like, I don't even watch TV. I have a subscription to YouTube, and I pay $10 a month so I don't have to watch the ads. And there's a lot of shysters on, especially in real estate, in everything. Like, even in your world,
you got to weed through them.
There's a lot of people that are full of shit. But like, if you find the guys, if you're interested in real estate at all, there's a tremendous website. It's called Bigger Pockets. It's on YouTube. And those guys will, you know, they're not talking about buying $500 million and 500 units and all this shit that's kind of pie in the sky. It can happen, but the chances of it happening 1 in a million. But they actually teach you how to do real estate, like how to, you know, like the tax advantages of doing it. What happens is the rich people, right, and the educated people, the people that you know, go to these big schools and all this stuff, they're doing something different than what we're doing. You know, they're making us work, right? Get a paycheck, and the first thing they're doing is taxing us. And then we just pay taxes, and then at the end of the year, they might give us a little back so we feel like we're not getting screwed. They're doing things that are completely different. There's so many tax not evasion,
exemptions or whatever,
exceptions and just workarounds that you can, you know, and especially in real estate, there's this thing called depreciation. And I won't try to explain it because I probably do a terrible job. But while your house is appreciating in value, stuff is depreciating in the house, like the carpet.
Okay,
right? The carpet needs to be replaced at the end of 15 years or 7 years or whatever it is. The windows, the roof, all this stuff. So you're actually taking losses on something that's gaining in value.
Wow.
So you don't pay taxes, and then they get this other crazy thing. It's called a real estate professional. You become, if you work 750 hours in a year on real estate, you become a real estate professional. They let you take the deductions on the carpet or the windows or the roofs or all that stuff. They let you take the deductions against your ordinary income. So if you make $100,000 and you take $100,000 in losses, you don't pay any taxes.
Okay.
How fucking corrupt is that, right?
Right, and there's a lot of stuff that we don't know
They
about.
don't tell any of
they
us,
hoard,
right?
They hoard the secrets, I think.
The only reason why I know is because I watch it all on YouTube and I pay attention to it, right? But like they don't teach it to you in school, not any school that I've ever been to, you know. And I was never a school guy anyways, right? I can't sit still. We were talking about it earlier, the swivel chair.
Yeah, that's why I get the
I've always been really a hyper kid, and I, you know, to sit me, like the worst thing you can do to me is sit me in a place that I can't leave. You know what I mean? That I, like school.
Right, jail, prison.
Jail,
so
exactly.
that's a good reason why you didn't go there with all that
well,
stuff.
the little bit that I did was the most horrific thing that's happened. Losing my dad, you know, and you know, the little bit of time that I did was the worst thing. You know, there's a couple of things out there that were bad, but I was not really built for that. You know, and it wasn't like I was afraid. I just can't sit still, and they had me assault for 23 hours a day, and I'm like, you know, that's no way to live. I don't think they should. You know, there's no reason to do that to people, right? There's a way to do this shit. It's not for lack of money. This is what kills me. It's, you know, like the stuff that's happening down Mass Ave in that area. There is so much money down there, you know, that's people trying to do the right thing to help, but making no difference at all. And the government is spending so much money on it. They just, you know, I don't know what the answer is, but I know what they're doing is not the answer.
Yeah, not just throwing money at it. Let's sit down. Let's get some thinkers. Let's get some people who actually know how to do things.
There's people that are a lot smarter than me that can figure out a way to help people. And you know, I'll say it to the dudes down there. I'm like, they literally should roll up on you if you use them on the street. They should roll up on you. This is very controversial, but they should roll up on you and arrest you. And they should say to you when you go to court, you can either go to jail or you can go to detox. Yeah. Because what that does is it gets you off the street and it gives you another day to live. Yeah. Right. And it's because this shit is killing.
Sometimes people can't help themselves. You know what I mean? It's like
but you get separated from it for 60 days, and at least you got a chance, right? And they could do that with medication and a detox. Like you don't have to go do it in a jail cell, right? So that's your choice. Like you should be able to choose which one you go to, right? We're spending enough money, and people will say, "Oh, that'll be a fortune." We're already spending it. We're already spending it, and it's not working. And you know what we're doing? We're keeping somebody alive for another day. I just lost a buddy of mine. We buried him 3 weeks ago. 57 years old, 4 kids. You know,
it's unbelievable.
You know, jock, athlete, good guy. You know, he was a cop. You know, for 25 years, and he got hurt, went on the oxys, and
it doesn't discriminate. Doesn't matter if you were.
And he's the greatest guy in the world. You know what I mean? And he tried. He kept coming and trying, and he just couldn't get it. And then finally, you know.
Well,
but it's like
hopefully he's resting in peace at least.
Yeah,
you know,
it's just a nightmare, and you know you see it all the time. It's just. You know, even in the 12-step program that I have, you know, we've lost in my group. We probably lost 5 guys that I know of in the last year. You know what I mean? It's not like back in the day when they tell you, you know, if you don't think you're an alcoholic, go back out and drink. You can't tell people that anymore, right? Because they go back out and they die. Yeah. You know, when you go back out and you're an alcoholic and you drink, you just get drunk, right? And then you do stupid shit. You might get in trouble or something, but you're not. You know, for the most part, you're not dying of alcoholism the way people are dying of drugs, and it's just
not at all.
It's there's no reason for it, and you know there should be severe consequences for these people that are bringing it into the country.
Poisoning people.
Yeah, Yeah, it sucks. It's just there's nobody deserves that. Nobody deserves to live like that. Nobody deserves to feel like that. You know, I don't know how your story on that stuff, but it's like
Yeah, well,
nobody wants
yeah.
to be a junkie. Nobody sets out, you know, and you know. Nobody sets out with that in mind. It's like, I remember them telling me, I started telling you the story. I remember them telling me when I was a kid what would happen. And I was like, that's never going to happen to me. It's like, you know, I'm not that guy. I'm not even interested
And I hear
in
you
that.
are talking about it exactly what you said wasn't going to
60
happen.
years old, and I got a lifetime of experience.
Absolutely,
you know?
Joe. So I guess if there was like one thing that you would want someone to get from like hearing your story about sobriety, what would that be?
There's a way out. You know, there is a way out. Like I believe in God, right? And I don't have any problem saying it. You know,
that's great. I love that.
I did for a while. You know, I thought it was weakness, and I thought it was.
Well, society's almost gotten to a point where they try to shame you for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like, nah, f that.
I got
man.
on my knees and I begged God to help me, and I won't get into what happened, but it was definitely not the way I wanted it to go. If I had scripted it out, I would have had a lot softer landing.
It never is when you God's funny like that sometimes. Like
but
how he works.
I wound up in the hospital for 3 weeks, and they didn't think I was going to make it,
and here you are,
and here I am,
doing fights, promoting, putting together great events.
Living my dream,
so
literally.
let's talk one more time before I let you go, man, about that, you know, the new event, the next event you got coming up, man. Why don't you promote that, tell the people where it is.
It's all of our social media and all of our website and everything is all combatfc.tv.
Yep.
So we do live mixed martial arts events. We'll probably have 15 fights on June 13th, which is a Friday night at the Shriners Auditorium in Wilmington. It's 13 miles north of Boston, all free parking. And it's all guys that are either fighting to get to the UFC or guys coming out of the UFC fighting to get down, you know, fighting to get back into the UFC. And it's all, we're like a regional player, so all the best guys in the Northeast will come fight for us. So all the top guys that are really serious about making it will come fight for us, and then they'll get the opportunity to fight for the UFC, or at least a chance to fight to get in to see them. So you see all tomorrow's stars today. Like I said, John Jones fought for us. So
absolutely, it's
pretty cool. And the event, like I said, June 13th, combatfc.tv, and I'm psyched. I'm really happy to have you back.
Absolutely, I'm looking forward to it, man. And so it seems like everybody's hungry one way or another. Guys might have just took a drop from the UFC, and they're trying to get back. And then you got the guys coming up. So you know something's bound to happen, right?
Meet in the middle.
Something's bound to happen.
That's the other thing is these guys fight their asses off, right? They, you know, when you get to the UFC, all those guys are fighting just to save their spot. But,
right.
You know, when you get to our level, to a regional show, you know you're getting a really tough fight, and but that's what guys want. They've been fighting in these local shows, trying to get to the point where they can get to a show on a regional level to get the opportunity to get the exposure to get to the UFC, and it's pretty cool.
I'm looking forward to it, guys. Hopefully, I see you there. Hit me up for tickets. Hit up Joe. Go on the website. Guys, remember, it is what it is. The Bounce Back Podcast. I'm B. Luke. I got Joe Cav with me. Combat FC. Remember, guys, it is what it is. What's next is what you make it. And what's next better be to be at that fight. Let's go. Thanks again, Joe.
Thanks, brother.
Bounce back, you got a moment when they see you down this